So thank you guys for spending this next half hour with me. I'm going to get right into it. And I wanted to let everyone, Chris, awesome. Thanks for coming here on your camera for a second too. We're going to have a nice little discussion here at the end for the last 5 to 10 minutes. And because I think that when we talk about finding inspiration without the internet, which is the form of this topic, hearing from you guys as well and what you guys go about is going to be super helpful. So I can't wait to hear that. I'll share some of my own journey. So, and without further ado, let's get started. So I'm going to share my screen and then I'm going to ask everyone, can you see my screen and can you hear me okay? Thanks for the thumbs up, Jay. Awesome. So yeah, this is a session about becoming inspired without the internet, on the internet, which is always fun. So let's get started. So I'm inspiring you through the internet about how not to do these type of things. Just kidding. But this is a session about being intentional, I think, and is the theme between all of my presentations, the idea of being intentional with our actions and desire to create by, in some cases, unplugging and from our most used devices and finding other forms of inspiration, being willing to explore and try new things. These things are different tools and techniques that I've used recently. So in the last year is what I've included here. And hopefully you guys become inspired by one or two of these things, and then we can have a discussion. Sound good? Perfect. So first, as I just mentioned, there's no particular order to these type of things that inspire me, and we'll get started. The first thing I'm going to say is journal and free writing. This is something I do every single day. So I have a journal. It is a very pretty journal. It's over $75 because I want to be inspired to write in it. And every single morning, I will sit for 10 or 12 minutes with my own thoughts and just do something. The act is called free writing. The idea is to write without a filter. And through my own personal experience, this took a while to do. For those of you who know me, I produce a lot of content where it comes to video editing and motion graphics, and recently have begun to script that content more and more, but also put together marketing behind that content that I am teaching and driving. And sometimes to basically lead myself or inspire myself to some of my pitches and courses, free writing is the act that I embark on, not to mention some other ventures as well. So the idea for me, I sit down for 10 minutes with a timer and just write, no filter, whatever comes to mind. The idea at the end of it is to find some sort of connection to some of my endeavors. And the connection is established by finding keywords in the free write that relate towards that content. And from those keywords, I would essentially then drive contrasting keywords and then mind map that. And Jay, you had mentioned a few days ago, you've joined me for a couple of sessions, how you use mind mapping. So I can't wait to hear about that later. But the idea of taking those words and then throwing them into a mind map. So this is something that is inspiring and easy to do, as well as just a task in general that once you get a hang of the idea of doing it without a filter, it's amazing what you'll find throughout your personal life and how you can relate some of that towards both commercial content that you produce, as well as your personal endeavors. So that's one of the tools that I use for inspiration. Okay, moving on. Travel. This is a two-part. So for a number of years, I embarked on seeing the Northern Lights. I am in an area where you can't see them every day, but I've seen them 12 times throughout my life. And I took my own money. There was no course pitch behind this, and just went out to try to find and see them. And photography for a number of years was just something that I did in the background, and haven't really shared too much because it was just one of those things that was very personal to me that I didn't want to have a monetization behind. So this ended up allowing me to travel in Canada. I've seen them in both the Yukon and Northwest Territories. I've traveled to Iceland twice and seen them once there when I traveled to the far north. And the place that I saw them the most was in a town called Tromsø, Norway. It is it's like close to the border of the Norwegian Sea. And because it shares a close border to Finland, you have two routes of which you can see the Northern Lights. But this was one of those things that I embarked on and provided just a lot of inspiration because it's cold climates, number one. So it might not be, your dream vacation for everyone. Usually you'll go to these cold climates because the Northern Lights are associated with the North, although there are Southern Lights. So you have to go to these far latitudes to see them more. And the adventure behind it was something that was really inspiring to me. And I try to use colors a lot from the things that I've gained in different productions that I do. So I'll pull green as well as purple themes into this. Hi, Louisa, it's nice to see you. This is aspect number one. And for many of us, the idea of traveling anywhere far in 2020, and even now, is not a reality as the world sort of figures itself out coming out from this pandemic. So this travel that was so dear to me and cut off overnight became local travel. Instead, during the pandemic, I literally just switched to taking drives in my surrounding area and discovering new routes. So I moved out of Toronto. I'm about an hour outside. It's called Simcoe County, a town called Barrie. And throughout the week, I'll take 2 or 3 drives. It's close to Ontario cottage country and just become inspired by different things that I see. And sometimes these are shorter. Sometimes they're just 10 or 15 minutes long. Other times when I have things to execute outdoors, I'll just take different routes to hopefully see and become inspired by things. Next week, I'm in the process of writing a book on creativity called Finding Creativity in Uncertain Times. It was a presentation that I recently just did earlier this week. And in order to complete the book, another form of travel is locally, I'm going to an island on Toronto that's called Toronto Island, and they have an artist center. So for a very low and nominal fee, I'm pretty much going to go on an island and feel like it's a vacation far away from home and embark on doing some writing over the span of 4 or 5 days away and disconnecting from the internet. So those are just some ideas in terms of how I use travel, both far as well as just locally, to become inspired by switching it up. And in some ways, discovering it's so, I think, automatic for us to become used to routines in the places that we live. So by switching up the travel or the different routes that you take, as simple as going to the grocery store, or even as a form of a break, can really provide a form of inspiration that's away from the internet, because every person's location of where they're from has beauty to it. And it's just up to seeing and absorbing that beauty. One way to do that is to switch up your routine. Cool. Moving on. This is, some people might meditate, and I do quite a bit using an app called Headspace at home. But another thing I like to do because I go on constant walks with my little puppy. His name is Ray. He's a Bichon poodle. And I'll go on walks with him and try to be very observant to everything that's going on, not to mention, of course, taking care of the dog at the same time. But I'll do this as well as take walks throughout the day and do something called the walking meditation. The idea is to be, is to observe and to be observant of your walk, and also to identify all the things that are happening around you. So on a walk, this can basically include sounds. So identifying the sound that takes place, identifying the smells around you, your pace of walk, your rhythm, your body sensations. And this goes a long way into like, okay, well, it puts you in a place where you are present, number one. On top of being present, these observations I find can lead to discoveries and even allow you to relate to different types of content that you're producing. So it's just a great way to get in the present as well as be at peace with where you are or observing where you are, no matter which state you're in and what emotions you're currently feeling. So something I love to do is to take these random walks throughout the day, and also a great way to break up, sitting for a lot of time, which I do, delivering course contents as well as just video editing and motion graphics in general, great way to break up from my computer and go outside and then just observe what's happening around me. Cool. This is something I started and I've fallen in love with. It's connecting to something that you've enjoyed as a kid, but no longer do. For me, this was piano. From the age of 6 to 12, I played the piano, and teenagers are teenagers, and I just stopped playing piano at the time. But I always, when listening to music, I become very attracted towards the sound of the piano. It soothes me. So I started recently, I got this like mini keyboard from Amazon online for under $100. And every once in a while during breaks throughout the day, I have some sheet music and I play the most simplest of tunes, but I find it really relaxing. And it's almost like a form of muscle memory and creativity, bringing me back to my childhood, like a visual, almost, there's no other words to describe it, but it definitely brings me back to a new, other forms of creativity that have, in some cases, I would say, been, thrown off to the side with other paid work and ventures that I have. So I just love this fact of this idea as well of connecting something that you used to enjoy as a kid, and potentially trying to revisit it, especially if it's something that if you're involved with a certain expertise, which might take you away from some of these things that may be considered more simple, or just something that you're passionate about and exploring it just for the reason of having fun. This is a little bit of a cheat, but because it involves, most of the things that I watch these days are, on a computer or connected to the internet. So the cheat is the idea of pre-downloading different things and then listening to them. If you don't like the cheat, things like music playlists, which I find music extremely inspiring. If you don't want to go through your Apple Music subscription or your Spotify subscription, maybe the alternative is to, grab an old record player. And like my friend Aaron Stern, who's involved in a lot of motion and visual effects work, he plays records all the time at home and becomes inspired by it, not to mention just the sounds of that old record player. I'm a big fan of podcasts, and they kind of go hand in hand sometimes with long drives and that exploration that I do. So one of my favorites right now is a podcast called Smartless, where there's a number of 3 comedians who run that podcast, and they have a special guest every week. And I find it very inspirational. So you should totally check it out. I don't want to spoil any more. Has anyone heard of that, by the way? Just raise your hands, the Smartless podcast. Okay. Jason Bateman is behind it, as well as Will Arnett. And the other person's name, Sean, the last name is not coming to me, but he was a writer on SNL. The great part about it, and what's so unexpected, is while there is humor in it, they are very serious as well in terms of sharing experiences from what they've learned as actors and comedians throughout the year. And some of the guests that they have are just incredible. So you should totally check it out. A little bit of a cheat, like I mentioned, but the idea of pre-downloading it, you're not connected to the internet. I backed up on a few slides there, and now I'm on this next slide here where I have an e-bike and I love to explore paths around Simcoe County. There's a number of waterfront trails, in fact, about 30 in my surrounding area, and taking, let's say once a week, my bike and putting it in my car and then going on one of these paths is super inspirational to me. I love being out in nature and being with my bike. The benefit of the e-bike is I can pedal really far, very fast. And then when I get lazy, just plus that in terms of having that pedal help acceleration and move back. So just another thing that I love to do is just taking my bike out and exploring paths, and they don't involve any type of internet connection whatsoever. Anyone else bike ride around here? Jay does. Cool. Jay does. The other Jay does sometimes too. Okay. I can only see a certain amount in my gallery, so I'll have to go back to that and just we'll open up that conversation here in a second. Cool. Use the phone for its original intention and phone someone. So I find there's definitely a lot of information that you can get off to someone through text messages that it is extremely clear. But if it comes to a close friend, and what's the harm in giving them a phone call or having a conversation? In fact, I prefer to phone my colleagues. Sometimes that is through the internet, through Zoom, but other times it's just simply by just picking up the phone and calling and having a conversation. There's nothing more soothing to me than to hear someone's voice and connect with them that way. It's just so much more meaningful to me than just a series of text messages that you share back and forth. I think what's something interesting about this too is the internet has played a great role in this as well, and in offering forms of communication during the pandemic that we wouldn't be able to have otherwise without it, such as a Zoom call, right, where we could chat back and forth, as well as allow us to have conversations with people abroad, which we never would, and see their faces and connect with them in that way. So while this is intended to inspire without the internet, the idea of in some cases using technology and connecting with people away from, let's say, a convenient text message. Cool. I think I have just two other points here. And one of those is as things begin to open up, the idea of attending meet and greet events, as well as starting conversations with new people. While this was initially very scary for me to do, has been, I contribute this to having a solid work connection group. This is the way that I had made that happen, is by attending new events. In fact, attending these new events alone, making introductions to people, in some cases, people that inspired me, as well as just random people. And through these conversations, several of the opportunities that are now presented or presenting themselves to me have come from these experiences, from throwing myself out there. I'm currently involved in some meet and greets, just small photography events around Simcoe County. And I started going to these meets a few weeks ago outside, but just a way to meet people new and have conversations. You never know what might come out with that. So I think that opening yourself up to especially new events, and I would go a step further, maybe even a new event that is outside of your regular wheelhouse, could offer creativity and new forms of inspiration that you might not even expect. Cool. And this is a combination of away from the internet and then just digital workflows. The idea is that I believe that when you look at applications such as various things inside of Premiere Pro, and even graphic applications like Photoshop and Illustrator, all of these digital processes that we've come to know and love and that we are now automated for us come from a history of other processes that never involved a computer. It took me a few years, actually, when I was learning about different applications such as Premiere Pro, to really understand what leading was. I used to call it leading the first time that I was introduced to the term, because it was never explained to me. And after discovering that process and then drawing a parallel to how that takes place in a digital form, has been extremely helpful to understanding the workflows that now take place. If we looked at that in forms of video editing, and Louisa could probably contest to this too, Premiere Pro still uses the term bins. And you're like, well, why is it a bin? Right? It's like, it's a folder to anyone on a computer, but it's a bin because in the old days, they used to take film strips and they threw it into a bin. And that was their way of classifying and categorizing and organizing things. But without that knowledge or getting your hands on these non-digital processes, I think in some ways miss forms of communication of that digital experiences that we're so accustomed to and used to. This picture isn't here by accident in the background as well. You know, your standard Polaroid camera. And for the longest time, Instagram was only in that square aspect ratio and all based about this Polaroid experience. So it's really interesting to see how these processes and this history, maybe how you can get involved with that history, like picking up an old photo camera and seeing how they have inspired some of the plugins or effects that you know and love if you're in that genre of work. And this is sort of my wheelhouse of inspiration. I cannot believe I've just chatted for 21 minutes straight, but this is a great time to open up the room to questions, thoughts, and hear from some other people and how they become inspired without the internet too. And maybe I should even check the chat because there's 28 messages here. Awesome. Thanks, Jay and Jay. Cool. So don't everyone speak at once, but I'm curious, does anyone have anything that they would like to share in terms of something that inspires them outside of the internet?
I can disable the setting that prevents you from, yeah, I'll do that right now. All right, you're good to go if you want to unmute.
Perfect. Hi, Jay.
So, hi. Hey, so I have a fun one. I'm a little bit of a comedian and raised my kids talking in funny voices and giving all their stuffed animals, you know, little personalities and stuff. And we happen to have a yard full of squirrels in the middle of Sacramento. And so when I'm bored and I just cannot be on the screen any longer, I'll sit down with my camera and I will have the squirrels have conversations. And then while I'm giving them each a personality and a discussion between two squirrels, I will purposefully look for their positions, their expressions, their behaviors to fit that story that I'm creating.
Oh, that's so cool. I love it.
It's a lot of fun.
It must be a lot of fun. Is it in terms of what was the, I guess the expression, the expressions you did the most recently on the last time you did that? On the characters' faces. Yeah.
We have a squirrel named, we call him Chip because he's very old. He's got a lot of gray around his eyes and on his back, and he's kind of a crotchety old booger. And we have scrub jays that like to come down and try to dive bomb the squirrels. And so Chip's last expression is kind of one looking up like, the hell do you think you're doing coming after my seed? And the scrub jay is up on a branch going, yeah, but I want your seed. And you can kind of see that interplay, just the conversations, or when the baby squirrels, we have a lot of very young juvenile squirrels right now, and they'll come up and kind of peek over the edge of the seed dish, and Chip will look at them like, no, not right now. I'm the old man, I'm eating, bug off. And then they'll run away. It's a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Hey, Nick, I had a real quick question. I love your talk about getting back. It's almost like a throwback. We're almost going back to before technology and what did we do before we had phones? What did we do before this thing? What did, you know, do you think it's also that we're so busy in the now, and this has been a theme from some of the other speakers, that we're not really seeing what's around us? And by trying to remove ourselves from some of this technology, it opens us up to the things that we walk by every day, but don't really see, right? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a great point. Jay, I think that there's definitely something with technology, and depending on how you use it, that can bring up the anxiety buttons, you know, especially if you want to be involved with what is now deemed necessary, like social media, to surround yourself in these social media applications. Let's go with Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook and TikTok, and get notifications from all of them at once if that's your chosen journey. It's a lot, you know, a lot of responses and a lot of people notifying you of what they like or dislike about the stuff that you share. I think that a lot of modern day companies, with people that I have contracts with, I mentioned this in the Finding Creativity in Uncertain Times talk, but a lot of the platforms like Slack or Microsoft Teams are like dressed like WhatsApp, right? So they have the friendly appeal to them of a chat system. And that chat system now exists on your phone, and you're receiving these notifications all of the time, where it's even almost more invasive than an email, because you're checking and you're being dinged. So yes, I think that there's something about the fact of sometimes removing yourself from technology and getting back to simple observation techniques that can definitely be soothing for people, as well as also it forces us to kind of get out of what's now considered the comfort zone. Technology is everything, and for a while it was the only form of communication between all of us. And taking your steps away from that and seeing other things can be inspiring, and also allow you to use these tools in the ways that you want to, maybe, or potentially want to, or come from new perspectives of these tools. I hope that answers a bit of your question.